Good morning, one and all, and happy new year. Welcome to part four of FEDC's Legislative Advocacy Series. I'm Casey Barnes, Chair of FEDC and Regional Market and Economic Development Lead for BRPH, Architects and Engineers. Advocacy is a huge pillar of FEDC's mission, and this series has been tremendous in helping our practitioners become better educated, informed, and more effective at advocacy. Over time, our expectation is that our success in advocacy, both as individuals and as a unified team, will increase as we work to propel economic development forward here in our state. Today, we're excited to drill deeper into the governor's Floridian's first budget, easy for me to say, with a deep dive into areas affecting economic development. With that, and no further ado, I'd like to introduce our Vice Chair of Advocacy, Jeff Hendry. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Casey. Casey did a great job introducing the topic and the subject matter. I just want to echo the last three sessions have been fantastic. Great learning experience for all of us, learning about not just the things you read about in the newspaper, but some of the deeper insights and the things that really happen behind the scenes and the leadership that we need to be communicating with and getting our message to. So with that said, I just want to turn this now over to Derek McGee, who's been a great counsel for us, continuing to lead us in our education related to advocacy, and looking forward to hearing what's on the budget, governor's budget, because it's the starting place for it all. So I'll turn it over to Derek, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Casey. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. Happy New Year. I think we can still say that because it's only 9 days in. But grateful to be on with you all. Let me thank Beth once again for the opportunity. So this morning, I have a PowerPoint I want to kind of walk through. I won't bore you with slides, but I do want to kind of just share with you some numbers. Prior to pulling it up, I want to just kind of level set if I may. So the governor did release his recommended budget, and just for everyone to know or remember that the Florida Constitution requires the governor to release a recommended budget 30 days before the start of session. So he is constitutionally required to release the budget. Once he releases this budget, the legislature really has one responsibility, which is to receive the budget. They're not obligated to do anything short of receiving it, and the governor can't dictate to them that they do anything short of receiving it. The best way to describe the governor's recommended budget, in my opinion, is the governor is saying, if I could actually pass the state of Florida's budget, this is how I would fund things. And so when you look at the recommended budget, it gives you a great insight to the governor and his office's thinking as it relates to things that are germane to us, but also in a larger spectrum as well. So as we prepare to walk through these slides, you're going to see some dollar figures that the governor in the budget. These numbers come directly from his recommended budget. And so there's some wording as well. I was sharing with Casey and him, there is a pattern on each slide as far as the visuals. I'll see if anybody picks up on it. It's a little fun I wanted to put in the slides. But let's kind of walk through where things are. So as mentioned, the governor has dubbed his budget on a consistent basis Floridians first. So his main goal and main message to everyone is that his budget is focusing on Florida's constituency and Florida overall. I think it's important to also make mention that Florida recovered handsomely from COVID's impact in 2020. We were the first state to reopen, and we reopened early when most states were still shut down, and we got criticized for that. But the governor was forward thinking as a visionary, and as a result, budgetarily, Florida is doing really well in our rainy day fund, as well as just in budget growth. I worked for Governor Bush out of college, and I remember as a young employee when the Governor Bush got criticized for proposing a $50 billion budget. And people said that he had lost his Republican credentials because he was growing government. The governor's recommended budget that you're about to look at is a little over $117 billion. And so it kind of speaks to just Florida's growth and how wonderful we're doing as a state and how we compare even to other countries in that regard. So I think that's important. So as I aforementioned, the governor's recommended budget it totals at $117.4 billion. He released that on December the 10th, which again, it was just shy of the 30-day constitutional requirement of having it out there. And so $117.4 billion. The succeeding slides are going to kind of break down some of the highlights that the governor has in that budget. This budget is a little bit more in total dollar amount than the current operating budget for the state of Florida, which covers our current fiscal year from July 1st of 25 to June 30th of 26. So there is an increase in that. I think it's also important to remember this is the governor's last session as our sitting governor. And so usually during this time that the governor, as they're preparing to exit, they're thinking about legacy. They want to make sure that they are concretizing their priorities over the years and making sure that that which they have fought for over the course of their terms can't be easily undone in the succeeding years. So there was some budgetary highlights from the governor's budget. Again, $117.4 billion is the governor's total amount. He's putting 16.75 billion in reserves. And because, again, I mentioned the COVID and the recovery from COVID initially, intentionally, I did that because it speaks to our ability to be able to invest more and more dollars into our reserves, which is very important. And those reserves are important because Florida is a hurricane state, right? And whenever we get hit by one hurricane, the recovery time to be able to jumpstart the state, be able to restart infrastructure, do all repairs is usually in the billions. So having money in the reserves is very, very important so that government does not have to be shut down and the way we do business can continue on. So the governor is proposing 16.75 billion to go into reserves. Debt reduction, right? We see that the governor is continuing an accelerated debt. We have a great ranking when it comes to Florida's handling of debt and paying things off. So that's always a good thing. Education is something that's important, just us in general. He's proposing a historic $30.6 billion. Now, what's important about this is that $30.6 billion is encompassing both K through 12 education and higher ed, right? So I think that's important. The two largest revenue generators and the two largest expenditures of Florida's budget is healthcare number one because of Medicaid, and then education number two, right? And so we invest a lot of money in those two spaces, but they also eat up a lot of money in those two spaces as well. Public safety, right? So this encompasses our law enforcement, first responder, really law enforcement, judges, attorneys, corrections officers. So the governor is, again, proposing pay raises for sworn law enforcement officers. We saw from other states, law enforcement officers were leaving their states and moving to Florida. Florida, for several years, actually, were doing marketing and advertising in other states, encouraging law enforcement officers and others to move to Florida, and many did. And so the governor is proposing pay increases for sworn law enforcement officers as a continuum. This is a continuance of what he's been doing at least the last 3 or so years. Tax relief is something that big. As you guys know, every year the budget always encompasses tax holidays. So that's usually back to school, sales tax holiday, disaster recovery, and a few other things. And so this is kind of speaking to that. One of the things the governor has pushed a lot has been the Second Amendment sales tax holiday. That's been a big one. So those who believe in the Second Amendment and those who are owners of firearms, this sales tax holiday is put in place to be able to incentivize in that regard. The environment, the governor from the very beginning, even his first inauguration, he spoke about wanting to give our state back to he said to God and to Florida better than how we find it, right? So it's going to make some major investments in the environment. 9.5, so it's $1.4 billion for Everglades restoration, but the 9.5 number encompasses how much the governor has proposed since he's been in office, right? He's made the environment a critical point of his tenure and his time. So infrastructure, let's kind of just delve right into these matters. So infrastructure and transportation. So this would deal with the transportation work program out of DOT. This would deal with moving Florida forward, right? Anything in that regard, highway repairs, So we look at infrastructure and transportation, the government proposing $14.3 billion, which is huge. Now, because we've seen a great influx of people moving to Florida, we're now the third largest state in the country. But as a result of our constituency growing in Florida, infrastructure can't keep up with the pace of Florida's growth. And so the wear and tear on infrastructure, on I-10, on 75, on 95, turnpike, things of that nature. So when you're driving, you're seeing a lot of things taking place as far as infrastructure that's intentional because of the wear and tear of infrastructure as a result of growth, right? So it's a good problem to have, and so there's commitments being made in that regard. Healthcare and human services, as I mentioned earlier, the largest revenue and the largest expenditure in Florida state budget of the budgetary pie is healthcare. So that $4.1 billion is an important investment, but that encompasses a lot of things. That encompasses behavioral health, which is Florida seeing a huge, since I huge, they're seeing an increase in behavioral health, mental health, and substance abuse, and so there's impact in there. But this would encompass almost every healthcare agency to an extent. So even our elder affairs and things of that nature. Housing affordability is a major conversational piece. The governor has been consistent from day one. He has been a full supporter of both SHIP and SAIL, which is Sadowski Trust Fund. He has always proposed full funding of both SHIP and SAIL. Whenever you go through a budgetary downturn, trust funds usually get swept almost wholly. And so there were years where Sadowski Trust Fund was being swept 100 wholly. Now, granted, those trust funds replenish themselves within a year or so, but the governor is proposing, continual full funding of workforce housing, so SHIP and SAIL, but also Hometown Heroes is a program that the Florida Realtors and Florida Housing Finance Corporation have been major pushing for a long time. This is a program for first-time home buyers who are first responders, allowing them to be able to get um, basically loan assistance and getting money help with the deposits. It's supposed to be an evergreen program, a revolving loan program. And so this program is in high demand. Usually when the money becomes available July 1, they've seen records almost in less than 30 days. The entire investment has already been committed because of the demand of people buying homes in Florida. Government efficiency and workforce. I put this in here because I thought that this was critically important to understand. So this one really is just dealing with the elimination of positions. As you know, when the president came back into office, Doge became a big thing, and in every state, especially every Republican state, begin to also have their own level of Doge. Florida's no exception to that, and so this government efficiency and workforce is really looking across all state agencies, identifying vacancies in those agencies, also identifying where there is duplicative work being done, and how can those agencies really bring about efficiencies. For some of that is eliminating positions. Most of these positions, not all of them, are vacant positions through our state agencies. Vacant usually means 90 days or so it has been not filled. But they're also providing a 2% cost of living adjustment, again, which is very, very important. And the natural resources and disaster recovery, as I mentioned, the governor has been very vocal about his investment in the environment. And so this here is just that continuance in that regard. As a result of 2020 of COVID's impact of every state got infused with a lot of federal money. And those federal dollars are gone. But what our state did is the governor legislature actually used the federal money to plug budgetary holes and budgetary responsibilities, and basically were allowed to really store away state general revenue at a good amount. And so, although the federal monies are gone, Florida's still sitting on a good amount of money in reserves. But now you don't have that federal fund cushion in a sense to be able to do that. I want to now delve into just the economic growth that I think will be very relevant to this audience here. And so let's talk about transportation and infrastructure. I already mentioned about the $14.3 billion for the transportation work program. What's important to know about that work program, right, is that federal funds are involved in that. But that 5-year work program, they have a formula that's in place that kind of lays out each year for 5 years. Now, granted, every budget usually moves a project up to a more current year than how they are in a work program and things of that nature. That's still a huge investment. The $4.9 billion, again, this is all dealing with infrastructure, right? So this is highway construction, creating more lanes. And this is a result, again, of a good problem we have, which is Florida is in high demand. People moving here, not just in retirement, basically leaving their state, moving here for the workforce, moving here because just how Florida has been governed and how Florida is going to be governed. They're moving here. Seaport infrastructure is one I haven't talked about just yet, but it's a supply chain backups. This is major, but this one here, that 55.5 million, that consists of that seaport there, but it's $388 million. If you look at it in the budget, it's dealing with the seaport is 155 million, but also there's monies in there for aviation improvements, so for airports on their lands and their buildings. And so you look at that $388.8 million is consisting of seaports, airports, a little bit of space in there, but mainly the larger chunk is aviation improvements. For jobs and business development, so this is where we would get to Job Growth Grant Fund. The governor is proposing $50 million to Job Growth Grant Fund. Now, if you recall, this a couple of years ago, there was $75 million going to Job Growth Grant Fund. And then last session, the most current fiscal year we're in now, it's $50 million. And this is one that's important because we've seen Job Growth Grant Fund go over iterations over the years, right? It used to be dubbed under Governor Scott as a Rick Scott Fund. Because if you remember, there was a major fight several years back where the Florida House was just not favorable to economic development incentives, and so there was a move to really to try to eliminate those. And the Governor Scott fought hard when he was in office to try to create some level of fund, and that allows for when they're not convened in session to be able to really have it infuse into economic development opportunities. Governor DeSantis' first session in office, there was a reduction had, and then Governor Sanchez really has taken pride and ownership of Job Growth Grant Fund, and so he has continued supporting that, and so he is recommending $50 million, which will be a recurrence of the current fiscal year. The $80 million here for Visit Florida really is a re-up of their current investment that's in the state budget. There was also a time at that same time when there was a fight just doing away with economic development. Visit Florida got hit in that same conversation. My dear friend Mark Cruz is on. Mark lived through that. The House was just not favorable. The Florida Senate has always been very favorable to Visit Florida. Senator Ed Hooper has always been an unapologetic advocate for that. When COVID hit our state, Visit Florida became very critical to the reopening of our state and how we marketed and advertised. Florida was open for business and open for living. And so Visit Florida has found itself really able to get their monies re-upped with minimal interruption in that regard. They were also vulnerable a couple of years ago for having themselves sunset because there is a date in the statute that had to be reenacted every time that date comes up. Rural communities, I want to touch on this. And so the governor's recommended budget does speak to rural communities. Rural infrastructure fund, the governor is recommending a $30 million investment in rural infrastructure fund. And this is important because and I'll touch on this on a policy slide dealing with Rural Renaissance. Rural Renaissance also is recommending additional monies into Rural Infrastructure Fund. But as we guys know from this past session, Rural Renaissance did not pass, but there was still an investment made into Rural Infrastructure Fund. SCOP, which is a small county outreach program ran out of DOT, $81.9 million for that one. And then for SCRAP, the governor recommending $25.8 million, which is a small county resurfacing assistance program. And so this program here, in addition to the other monies we talked about for infrastructure, these monies here are designed solely for our small counties. A good number of those are in Northwest Florida. So these monies are dedicated to the small counties for their ability to do resurfacing and reconstruction of their county roads. And so you have those monies for rural communities. And then you also have the larger infrastructure funds that they also would qualify for as well. Affordable housing, I made mention to affordable housing and the governor's support of affordable housing. I use this picture really kind of let you know the governor means business when it comes to affordable housing. But he's proposing full funding of both ship and sale. and the re-up of the $50 million for Hometown Heroes. And so he's been very consistent in all 8 of his recommended budgets. He's been very consistent about affordable housing and what that looks like in that regard. And so that's really the government recommended budget in that regard. Of course, there's a lot of other items in there that really to talk about other areas that I didn't feel like was germane to this audience. I'm happy to actually share the link with you all if you really want to read through it. I'm a nerd. I love this type of stuff. And so I'm usually looking at it and trying to find things. It's also good to kind of see, based on the numbers that we just walked through, what the legislature ultimately does with the governor recommended. Do they pick up any of his recommendations? Do they increase it? Do they decrease it? All those things to me are fun to monitor. I did want to kind of speak to, while I have some time, speak to some policy and some budget focus. So policy focus, I had aforementioned about rural renaissance. There is a bill that's been filed. Senator Corey Simon has refiled rural renaissance. It's Senate Bill 250. There is currently no House companion, and I'm not sure if there's going to be a House companion to rural renaissance. I anticipate that there's going to be a continuance of a battle of rural renaissance. As of right now, that the presiding officers are not working collaboratively at the current moment. There's a lot of time for that to change, and so there's currently not a House companion bill to rural renaissance. The Senate's already advanced their rural renaissance bill to the full floor. So that bill will pass out the full Senate and be sent over to the House. See what the House does with that. And so that bill, though, is giving great investment in several areas of rural Florida. When Senator Albright was coming as Senate President, he made it known that he wanted to really focus on rural Florida and make sure that all the rural areas were given major investment. And that rural renaissance is not just in economic development, it's also in education, it's in healthcare, right? It's in the environment as well. And so across the board, he's trying to make sure there is major investment made in that regard. Property tax reform can be covered in both policy and budget. As you all mentioned from a previous presentation I gave you, Florida House filed 8 different bills for property tax. All 8 of those bills passed at least one committee. 4 of those 8 bills passed 2 committees, and then one of those 8 bills has made it to the full House floor. Currently, the Senate does not have any companion bills, and as of right now, there are no plans to have any companion bills. The governor to date is still adamantly opposed to all 8 of the House's bills. There are speculations the governor is going to call a special session for property tax. That has not been done yet, but let's not be surprised if that does take place. There is a rural counties or rural communities bill, rural counties bill that's out there. That's House Bill 723. There is not a Senate companion to that bill. Representative Abbott is the sponsor of that rural counties bill. Again, it's House Bill 723. So in that bill, he's proposing an additional $50 million for the small counties outreach program. He's trying to prohibit state land purchases in fiscally constrained counties exceeding 40% of the federal and state-owned land percentage. He's trying to require that state agencies expedite their payment requests for rural communities. As you all know, sometimes that's been a major challenge in the past, of just trying to get state agencies to expedite requests from or expediting payments, especially reimbursement payments. So that bill speaks to that as well. I'm not sure yet there's going to be a companion to that bill in the Senate. Right now, that bill has 4 committee references, which is kind of disheartening coming out the gate. Usually when you have 4 committee references, it makes it very challenging for a bill to get to the finish line during a 9-week session. There is a Department of Commerce bill, House Bill 741, Senate Bill 998. This is again a department bill. It encompasses several things in that bill that of importance to the department. I'm happy to share more about that bill and email you guys in that regard. But it deals with community development block grants involved in that. It has some E-Verify in that bill regarding making sure that employers maintain E-Verify on their employees. It exempts federal agencies from existing reverter requirements when it comes to land for military installation. And so there's a few other things in there dealing with economic disaster factors. But again, that is department bill, House Bill 741, Senate Bill 998. Representative Owen is the House sponsor. Senator Clay Yarborough is the Senate sponsor. The manufacturing bill is the same bill that was filed last year. The same sponsors, Representative Cobb and Senator True now. And so those bills have been refiled. I was actually tracking that bill last year. Those bills actually encompass a lot. And so the Department of Commerce, they're adding new duties for Florida Commerce in this bill, creating a chief manufacturing officer, and then giving the duties of what that officer will end up doing. They established a Florida Manufacturers Workforce Development Grant Program to be able to fund projects. It requires a department in consultation with the chief manufacturing officer and other partners to develop ranking metrics in that regard. And then it also creates a Florida manufacturing promotional campaign. And so that is all encompassing in the manufacturing bill. Again, there is a bill in both chambers. The Senate bill will actually be heard the first day of session in its first committee of reference in Commerce and Tourism. Deregulation, that bill is out there. Currently, there is not a Senate companion. But House Bill 607 is a complete dereg bill of all of the specialty practices. So deregulating the regulatory boards of accountants, of architects, of interior designers, of engineers. The engineers are the only ones in the bill. If that bill were to pass, engineers are the only ones that actually would have a delayed implementation. They will actually have 7 years. Theirs is not going back until 2033. Every other regulatory board will be eliminated as of June 30th. As you can imagine, all of those professions, those specialty groups are strongly opposed to the bill with major concern. The bill also puts a lot of pressure and demand on the Department of Professional Regulation, DBPR. So the bill does not eliminate the professions themselves. It deregulates the regulatory boards. And so the professions will still apply for licensure. The difference is that actually the department would then take on the full onus of releasing the licenses and providing regulation of them and also unlicensed activity. So the bill does not provide new positions for the department. It just basically gives them the responsibilities. So again, it does not eliminate the professions. It does away with their regulatory boards. That's important. Again, there is no Senate companion. This bill was filed last year, did not pass last year. There also was not a Senate companion last year. Many of you who were monitoring the Rural Renaissance bill last year, this is the bill that got tacked onto that bill, the latter part of session, that ultimately the bills ended up dying. AI, Bill of Rights, artificial intelligence. The governor did a press conference on AI. We raised major concern about chatbots, about the impact of artificial intelligence. There is a bill now out by Senator Tom Leek, Senate Bill 482. There's not a House companion yet, but there is a bill out in the Senate where the governor is speaking to chatbots and how AI will be handled as far as, the Bill of Rights or really regulation. There is conversation about this because the president released executive order where he said that the federal government basically will hand out or lay out the requirements and regulation. The governor has come out saying he does not agree with that. This should be handled by each state based on what's best for their states. And so this AI Bill of Rights is the governor speaking to the state of Florida. So that we're going to see a lot happen. There's a lot of AI related bills that's been filed by Democrats and Republicans in both chambers. And so this will be a very active year on artificial intelligence. There's a housing bill, this one dealing with accessory dwelling units. 313 is by Representative Danny Nix. 48 is by Senator Don Gates, and basically allowing for accessory dwelling units or ADUs to be put in place and allowing for individuals to have that. It creates a conversational piece and really a partnership with the local government, but allows local governments to adopt accessory dwelling units in that regard. So these are like much smaller homes, your normal single family homes, but it does allow that these are not your vacation rentals and things of that nature. But again, this will require local governments to adopt accessory dwelling unit ordinances. And so now people can actually pull permits and be able to develop ADUs. The Florida Realtors, as the largest trade association, is in full support of ADUs, as well as the League of Cities, Association of Counties. All those groups have been on record in support of that. I put vertiports on there. This was a raise of importance to some. If you look at those bill numbers, 1093 and 1362, the name vertiport is actually not what you're going to see. If you put that in there, it's actually in there as advanced air mobility. Advanced air mobility. This is actually bipartisan in its sponsorship. House Bill 1093 is sponsored by Representative Leonard Spencer out of Orlando. Senate bill is by Gail Harrell from the Treasure Coast. She has been the consistent Senate sponsor over the years. And so this is, again, dealing with advanced air mobility or vertiports. This adds vertiports in charging systems. It creates qualifying qualifications to be able to do this. DOT is required to create vertiport siting codes. So this bill does have a good onus on DOT. This is not just the future, this is actually the present. And so they're known as vertiport, but in the bill, it's advanced air mobility. And so these bills have been filed of recent meaning with this week. And so the House bill got filed on Tuesday. Senate bill got filed on Wednesday. And so Senator Gail Harrell has been the sponsor of the bill for at least the last three sessions. This is the first year for Representative Spencer. And so there'll be movement on this. There'll be conversation, activity on this as well. I'm looking at the time. Let me jump to the next slide, which is the final slide, dealing with a budget focus. So I have the first box in red, dealing with state budget reductions. I've covered this in previous presentations. I want to just remind you all that although we're doing really well in reserves and doing really well in our operating budget, the economists have met, and Amy Baker, the state economist, is projecting that there will be budget reductions, not in the most immediate fiscal year, but in fiscal years 27, 28, fiscal year 28, 29, they're projecting we're going to see a 1.5, $1.6 billion reduction in fiscal year 27, 28. So that's July 1st of 2027 through June 30th of 2028. She's projecting there'll be about a 1.5 to $1.6 billion budget reduction. And then for fiscal year 28, 29, so again, July 1st, 2028 to June 30th, 2029, the best way to describe that is the first two fiscal years of a new governor. She's projecting is going to be about a $6.6 billion reduction. So the new governor, whoever that is, will come into my AirPods died as I was talking. So I apologize. Bear with me one moment as I just take them out.
You all can still hear me. I apologize for that. They were fully charged. But so the new governor coming in will come in to projected budget reductions. And so she's advised that they should start making making the adjustments necessary this upcoming session. Both the Senate President and the House Speaker are both on record saying that this session they want to start looking at some budget reductions to really try to make sure that their successors do not find themselves being drowned by those reductions. Mentioned my property tax, it could be covered in both policy and in budget. That is going to be one of the largest conversational pieces during session. We dealt with affordable housing, ship sale, and hometown heroes. Other economic development funding that we talk about dealing with economic development requirements. Although Enterprise Florida is no more in existence, we still have obligations to meet current economic development deals that are in place. So the economic development toolkit is still being funded about $22.5 million. There's funding in there regarding military installation, regarding defense task force. All of those things are encompassed when you look at economic development funding. Transportation and infrastructure funding, I talked about that earlier, dealing with the Transportation Trust Fund, dealing with moving Florida forward, things of that nature. Education funding, the governor is again making a major investment in both K-12 education and workforce development and higher education, things of that nature. And so our partnership with state colleges and our state university systems, they're all being properly funded at a large amount by the governor, which will bode well for our partnership with each one of them. Rural funding, I covered that, dealing with rural infrastructure fund, dealing with small county outreach program, dealing with scrap. So there's again an infusing of money in that regard. This last one here, I just wanted to remind us, and I spelled the word governors wrong. I just realized that, so I apologize. But the governor's last session, and I put that there because I think it just kind of reminds everyone that's going to be the major umbrella over this session. The governor is in legacy mode, right? And so when you're in legacy mode, they're going to be looking to make reductions amongst the House and the Senate, The governor wants to make investments. And so that's going to lead to either can they come together to agree on something, or they're going to be at war with each other to the finish line. I'm having worked for three consecutive governors, minus Governor DeSantis. I've worked in-house for Governor Scott. I've been around governors when they're finishing their first term for reelection or when they're terming out, and they're all in the mindset of legacy. So regardless as to what the economists are projecting, when a governor is leaving office, they want to make sure that which they have prioritized over the course of their terms are not easily unfunded or defunded once they're left out. And so the governor will be very active, be very vocal in making sure that he can keep his projects fully funded. This is my contact information for anyone who's listening who may have a question. You can always call me, always text me. You can email me. I'm happy to provide any follow-up information, anything that I covered today. Happy to dispel any myths you may be hearing, anything in that nature. So happy to be of service. And then I'll give it back to Jeff, to Casey, or to Beth, and I'm happy to take any questions. But thank you all.
Derek, let me be the first to say thank you. Great comprehensive overview, and appreciate the many faces of Ron DeSantis. That was a nice treat your Friday morning.
Thank you for seeing that, Casey. I appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime. I did have a question, and it relates to the vertiport's advanced air mobility budget item. Recognizing there is a separate, or there was a separate line item, or a budgetary portion for the airport's
Mhm,
infrastructure. Are
mhm.
those two linked?
They're not linked, and I probably
Okay.
said they're not linked yet. So that the airport money I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
um, that usually is a re-up from previous years. So the seaports, the airports, when the transportation trust fund gets funded, right? There's a portion of monies that come out of the trust fund that go towards seaport, goes towards airports for aviation development work program and things of that nature. Vertiports does not come out of that. Right now, I think that the mindset is to separately fund that. But again, they really haven't talked about that just yet. But that's not encompassed in that money.
Thank you. Lucienne.
Thank you, Casey. And I'd like to piggyback on your conversation, if possible, Derek. First and
Yes,
foremost, thank you very much for this very robust and detailed presentation. It's tremendously valuable. I
absolutely.
wanted to dig into the vertiports a little bit more, and
Okay.
I understand if the answer is it's still to be determined. But do you see when it comes to supporting infrastructure development, if there is a nod to only public airports, or if they're looking at private development as well?
That's a really good question. Before I answer that directly, let me just kind of, if I can, kind of just for those who don't know anything about it, kind of just give a historical. The challenge with vertiports the last few years has been really there's several interested parties in this. And as a result, as I mentioned, Senator Gail Harrell has been the sponsor at least the last 3 years. The challenge has been 2 of those 3 years, Representative McFarland was the sponsor. And there were lobbyists involved, and there are a good number of people were actually on the same page with the department. At least the House bill, there was another lobbyist pushing for some other ideals, and they just not could not come to an agreement. And at the end of the day, right, the sponsors of the bills could not come to one consensus product, and so it never got through. I want to mention that because the dynamic of this, with a new sponsor in place, caused us to be is very interesting. Representative McFarland was very well versed and very interested in this, and they just could not come to an agreement. So there's a new sponsor, and it's a Democratic sponsor, which I think is going to cause for a lot of conversation. Representative Spencer's a good member; he's a freshman member as well out of Orlando, and so I don't know how versed he is on advanced air mobility. And I'm sorry, it wasn't McFarland; it was Representative Bankston, I think, who was a sponsor before. But so they have a new sponsor now in that regard. So now to your question at hand, um, it started out, it was really, really talking a lot about Orlando and Tampa, where the two main airports that vertiports really were focusing on, because both of those airports were already having conversation, already doing tours, already developing landscape at their respective airports for vertiports, which is why, when this was initially started talked about, back then it was Secretary Kevin Tebow of DOT, who then became the CEO of Greater Orlando Aviation Air Authority, and now he went back into private practice. But it was those two airports who really were the main ones that were the most receptive initially to vertiports, and that's why the public airport piece came into conversation, because those two airports, and they're large airports. Now, to the question about smaller or private airports, I don't know the answer to that, and here's why I don't know the answer to that, because um, the bills have been challenged to get to one consensus product to be able to have those conversations as to what it looks like. Um, as I mentioned earlier, this is not the future. This is the present. This is before us. This is happening, and so I think the department, in my conversation with the department, they realize that. I think the main thing for them is make it very, very clear as to qualifications, regulation, oversight, what is a federal obligation in this as well? Because remember now, with airports, FAA is major, and so no matter what a state put in their state law, if it goes against the FAA trumps what the state may put in place. So they have to make sure the vertiports fall in line with any federal guidelines or responsibilities. So that's critically important as well, which is why you don't hear a lot about private, because of the FAA requirement in that regard. And so I'll keep you posted as things progress, but I haven't heard a lot about private as of yet.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
response.
Absolutely.
David Coddington, your hand's raised.
Thank you, Casey. Derek, I'll chime in on the vertiports in a sec, but I've got a question in reference to the manufacturing and training grants. The city of Fort Lauderdale just approved this week a new parking garage downtown that will have a vertiport piece in it as well. And we're also in conversation with the Panthers in reference to Florida Panthers in reference to putting a vertiport. They already have a helipad. Bring a vertiport out there. Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport's got a downtown garage. We're in conversation with Fort Lauderdale Executive in reference to modifying that for a vertiport. So it's, as well as one of the new building towers downtown was bought from an investment firm out of Chicago. They're looking at, so I mean, to the point in reference to public or private, I mean, I think it's across the gambit, right?
Yeah.
So, but any new information on that would be appreciated as well. So thank you for. My question goes back. You talked about in reference to manufacturing and so forth. When I think of manufacturing, that's from big to small, but nonetheless, has there been any conversation or just typical support for training grants? Any talk about increasing that budget, or we're just, things are just moving along swimmingly? So I didn't see Adrian on the call, but I wanted to see if you had heard anything in reference to, that piece on continued funding for strong funding, I should say, for training grants.
I have not, but let me look into that. That's a really great question. I mean, branch.
It just goes hand in hand with the manufacturing piece, obviously.
Correct. I'll look into that, and I'll circle back through Beth on that answer. That's a really good question.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Casey.
Hey, Casey, it's Mark Cruz. I would raise my hand, but I can't find the button to raise my hand.
Mark Cruz.
Hello, Derek. Excellent preview. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask, housing usually not too contentious in terms of the numbers. In the areas that you've described, do you see areas of potential agreement and passage? Or I know there's been, obviously there's contentiousness amongst
Yes.
some of the chambers and the governor. Any areas where you think there's some chance for passage?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I mean, here's the thing, and I wish I would have kind of talked about this more in depthly. The challenge last session was the governor and the speaker were at odds. Speaker and Senate president were at odds. And so anything the governor wanted, the speaker was not going to give him. Anything the president wanted, Rural Renaissance being a good example, was not going to get. Sadly, not much has changed in those relationships. They're still at odds with each other coming into this session. And so my prediction is we may not see a Rural Renaissance, for example, House bill. I think if you talk to the Northwest Florida legislators, they're kind of, really trying to set expectations and don't have high expectations, because it is number one priority of the Senate president. And as a result, it now becomes a negotiating tool when it comes down to him and the speaker. When you look over at things like housing, for example, we've come a long way from, the trust fund being swept to where things are now. The challenge is, so the Senate will be recommending full funding of housing as well. What it comes down to is if the House wants to make it negotiating or not. And so I think the challenge we're going to have in the 2026 session is everything, even the things that have traditionally been fully funded or been funded at a good level, will become vulnerable for anything based on if one of the presiding officers or the governor highlights it as a priority. And that's the unfortunate state we find ourselves in. Now, granted, I'm in the camp of this. I'm going to probably do budget reductions. Been doing this 25 years. I don't foresee them ending a session without funding member projects at some level and without them making major investments in the governor's priorities and projects. And here's why. So after they finish session and special sessions, there's election season. And members have to be able to campaign on something. But also the governor will still be our governor until, November and ultimately to January 27th. But also he's still very popular. And so he will still be able to travel the state and be able to highlight things they did and did not do. And so although the gamesmanship will play out, I venture to believe toward the end they will invest properly in those regards. My concern, I will tell you for Sadowski as an example, is if the House and Senate chooses to go through with making reductions this session, in order to make real reductions and make real impact, they look at large dollar amounts. That then makes trust funds vulnerable, right? It then makes positions as far as employees vulnerable. In years past, when they've done major reductions or any reductions, trust funds are always vulnerable. And you start looking at Sadowski as an example, especially the trust funds that replenish really fast, they find themselves getting swept, as we call it. So that's what makes me nervous about a Sadowski is that. Now, the good thing is with the demand of growth in Florida, um, there's not enough housing to accommodate the growth that we have. And so they've been very intentional about making investment in housing, as you guys know. So I'm in the camp of believing they will ultimately agree on full funding of housing, because to zero it out or to cut the funding basically affects Florida overall, because the demand for housing is so very, very high. But I would just caution everyone that we should buckle up. It's going to be contentious coming out the gate, a lot of turbulence. It's because the relationships between the governor and the speaker did not was not repaired. The governor has any chance he's got in a press conference, responded to things. Those property tax bills by the House, the governor sees them as a direct insult by the House. And so those things, and then the speaker and the Senate president have not really been speaking to each other on how to land the plane. And so in that regard, I think we should buckle up for some major turbulence, at least coming out the gate. I think next Tuesday when session convenes, I would encourage all you to listen very intently to the speaker's opening day session speech, the Senate president's, and the governor's last day of the state address. Where I think you're going to hear each of them probably speak to things and kind of just tell you where things are going to go during session. So prepare for all of that.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm like Mark. I can't figure out where the raise the hand technology is either. But Derek, thank you. And yeah, I mean, just real briefly, I certainly would echo exactly what you're saying about rural renaissance. We have our our level of expectation has been beat down pretty well, but we just try to pick and choose where we can get some gains and some wins. However, I wanted you to comment maybe because we were at a big announcement on a range of awards.
Mhm.
Tuesday down in Steinhatchee was a great day, or Wednesday, I'm sorry. But this governor made very strong comments about, one is going to be redistricting special session that's coming for sure, and then there's an allusion to the property tax as well. So how do those issues just suck the oxygen out of everything else and complicate trying to get some real practical good things done? And that, just would value your position on that or your opinion.
So I would tell everybody take small breaths because it's major. This first of all, property tax, last session it was hovering over session this summer and now going into this session, right? The governor, as Jeff mentioned, has already come out and set the dates in April for congressional redistricting. This as a historical, real quickly, this is a result of President Trump asking all the red states and to really look at their congressional map and see if they can identify at least one, two, or three additional Republican seats in their area. And so Florida has kind of been scoping it out. They've identified at least two that they think they can do in the redistricting. They're in South Florida. For example, like Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz and Congressman Moskowitz could find themselves having their two seats merged into one, and then therefore parsing out a Republican seat down there. And so that's major, right? That's major. Property tax, I've always believed they're going to do a property tax special session. It's going to come at some point. But here is the challenge. Normally, you don't talk about special session before you actually are in a regular session. The governor's already setting those dates before you can go in the regular session. That's important. What's also important is the Constitution allows the governor himself to call a special session, or the presiding officers jointly can call one. Now, they can come for special session, the governor call, gavel in and gavel right back out, right? Play gamesmanship. The challenge for the legislature, especially those who are running for reelection, is that they can't campaign or raise money when they're in an active session, right? So it behooves them to get in and get out as fast as possible. The other thing is, it then leaves you to wonder if you're going to do a special session on redistricting, on property tax, then what are you doing on regular session? Their only real responsibility is to pass a balanced budget. But I'm in the camp of believing that we're not going to finish on time. I think they're either going to go into overtime, like they did this past session, or finish, come back on another special session for just the budget. Now, it behooves them to try to finish as much as they can on the budget, because the last thing you want is to be beat up going into an election season that you couldn't actually get a budget passed. Remember this past session, they didn't pass the budget till like June 11th, right? We were well into over 100 plus days of a 60-day session before they finally got a budget done. And so, again, I mentioned earlier about the governor's last session. All that factors in, can they land this plane on time? And I'm not there. I've had a conversation in my closing with this, a conversation with some senior staffers in the presiding officer's office. And one of them, whom I deem very credible, and his words to me is, Derek, make no plans before June 30th. And I started laughing, and he had a very stone face. And so I came back and said, well, can I at least get spring break, right? Like I want to spend time with my daughter and my son. But they're all preparing from a staff perspective to be here through June 30th. And that's regular session, even if it goes in overtime, but several iterations of special sessions encompassing that. And so again, I mentioned earlier about buckle up. We really should buckle up. It's going to be very interesting.
Thank
I
you
know we're
very
at that
much.
time, and so I want to yield it back to you, Casey, or to Jeff, or to Beth. And thank you all. Again, my email address was up there, so by all means, email me, text me, call me. I'm happy to provide any information, and then I'll give more on the manufacturing training grant question that was out there, David.
We got a couple more minutes for a couple more questions.
Well, if I can, since I'm on mute, I when I give other presentation, I usually have a couple of slides dealing with elections. I don't have that in there. I'll just kind of tell everybody that just, remember that this is active, right? So there's a lot going on. The primary is in August, the general is in November. So for the first time in almost 8 years, we have an open ticket for the governor's office. And so numbers are coming out as far as how quarter 4 ended. Congressman Byron Donalds has announced that he has like $45 million in the bank. I think he closed a little over $13 million in quarter 4. So that's October, November, December. Former Speaker Paul Renner just dropped that he raised a little over $5 million in quarter 4. And although that's small in comparison to Congressman Donalds, that's a large amount for someone who is not polling high, does not have the president's endorsement. Ultimately, Congressman Donald's lead is very, very large. And so, it'd be interesting how that plays out. But numbers will be coming out in that regard. Also, we have other statewide offices. Blaise Ngoli is running for chief financial officer. Representative Kevin Steele of the Tampa area is also now filed to run against Blaise Ngoli. He's actually working hard to get the President Trump endorsement. He's also agreed that he's going to put in at least $5 million of his own money into the race. He's the wealthiest legislator between the House and the Senate, so he actually has a lot of money he can actually invest in the race. Wilton Simpson has yet to file for reelection for agriculture. So we'll see how that all plays out. And then for Attorney General, Attorney General James Youthmeyer is running right now unopposed on the Republican side. The president did endorse him. And so his path to the finish line seems clear to get there. And so just want to remind everybody it's an active election season. And that also plays into session as well. And so just be mindful of that as well.
Yeah, Derek, I appreciate that perspective. And as many of you who are repeat offenders on this call know, we did, and Derek provided a really strong history of economic development, the players, the personalities that are in play here. I'm going to go out on a tiny bit of a limb and say many of the folks who are here have been in this series before. We really appreciate that. Quite candidly, looking at the 32 participants we have here, I think we could probably double this easily with the value of the content that we have. So if you do have other FEDC members that you think would value this kind of curriculum and this kind of intel and would make them more effective as us as a profession in the state, by all means, help us get the word out. Again, we really appreciate you, Derek, for your insight, Beth for keeping the trains on the tracks and getting us all together, and very appreciative. Any other final thoughts?
Casey, just to remind everybody to join us next Thursday, the 15th, for a quick 30-minute update from Secretary Kelly on the commerce bill that's been filed.
Outstanding. Any other final thoughts or comments? Going once, going twice. We get 3 minutes back in our day. Happy Friday, everybody.
Thank
Good
you,
weekend,
Derek.
Take
everyone.
care.
Thanks.
Appreciate you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yes.